So good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's study, and we're going to finish off this week with more of Nehemiah, see what we can accomplish today. But before we do, let's have a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we thank you once again for all the light that has been shining upon our path, and we just invite your Spirit to be here once again as we open your word. We know, Lord, that there's many things that we have to sort out, and we need your help. So we just ask that you can lead and guide in the study and the things that we discuss, and that you can point us to the scriptures that will reveal light for our feet. And so we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so I've been trying to figure out exactly what direction we should go with this. I know that we have many things that we have to solve, and we went over some of that yesterday. I always end up reviewing, but it's good to review. So we know that we have Nehemiah here in Nehemiah 13 in 432. It's 12 years after 444. It's 25 years after 457. It's a division of the 49 years, the 7 weeks. So we got it divided as into two sections of 13 and 36. And so I guess it depends how we look at it. We could look at this 36 as divided into 12 and 24. So you got 13, 12, 24, all in that 49 years. Of course, you could have the 36 together, and you can have the 25 together. So you compare them off either way. Now, what those mean as symbols, we had some discussion. What does 25 mean? What does 24 mean? We've understood 13 and 36. So those are just these divisions. Now, one of the things that I need to sort of solve, I guess, and I want to go to this chart. It's still going to look much the same. I'll share the screen differently. Okay, so this is a chart of the 70 weeks from 457 all the way up to 70 AD. This is a rather elaborate division of the 70 weeks in where I'm counting the number of days. This is part of my Week of Christ study, where I have, when you count from the 10th day of the 7th month in 457 BC, and you count 176,400 days, it brings you to October 13th in 27 AD. And then you got the 62 weeks there, for days that is. Now, sometimes here, when I'm looking at this period, so the 176,400 days, that's 360 times 490. That is, if you took the 490 years and you used a year of 360 days, and you counted from the 10th day of the 7th month in 457 BC, you wouldn't get to 34 AD. You would get to 27 AD, and you would get to October 13th, 27 AD. You'd be just 13 days past the 10th day of the 7th month. So anyway, that's how I'm trying to explain this chart. Then you have the actual number of days from 10th day of 7th month in 457 to the 10th day of the 7th month in 34 AD. And the difference between those two is 2,556 days. Right? And so if you add those extra days on there in between, you get that period of 2,569 or 70, depending whether you're counting inclusively or not. Right? So anyway, we have all these different spans of days, different ways in which I was trying to understand this period of time. Now, really what I want to focus on is we have the 1 week over here, and we have the 7 weeks here. So this period from the 10th day of the 7th month, which is October 29th on the Julian calendar in 457, to the 10th day of the 7th month in 408 is October 28th, right? So that's 17,896 days. So it's just, we have that date there. And then I counted from October 29th, 457 to September 22nd, 444. So that's the 25th day of the 6th month. And so you can see the 4,711 days there. So I'll zoom in so for people who have different devices. So you can see this period of time here. And this means this 36 years is 13,185 days. Now, we also have this other date, which we don't have in here in this chart, which is the 432. So the number of days from the 25th day of the 6th month to the first day of the 7th month, right? So the first day of the 7th month in, so that's going to be, I think it's going to be 4,405 days, maybe 4 or 5 days. I have to look at that. Let me go here. So look at this chart again. Okay, so we had, so in 444, we got, yeah, I'm just going to have to go here. Yeah, so there's 5 days difference. So, okay, let's see. So there's, 4,405 days and 13,185. Okay, so if I was going to do that division, there's 8,780 days between the 25th day of the 6th month and then the 10th day of the 7th month. So there's different ways we could look at that. No, I'm not going from the 25th. I'm going to, I should have had this all figured out, but I didn't actually think I was going to do this. So, okay, let me do this again. So we're going to go in 408. I could probably show you what I'm looking at here. Yeah, so October 28th. So you're going from October 29th, 457. In that 49 years, you're going to October 28th. When I start saving all these dates, I end up running out of space here. So I'm going to get this. Now you can't see what I'm doing. You will in a minute. What we're trying to analyze here is this 7 weeks. So here we got the Julian dates on the left side. You can't quite see full screen there, but so you can see we got the 10th day of the 7th month in 457, and then we have the 10th day of the 7th month in 408. So that's going to be 7 weeks. And we can see that's going to be 17,896 days. That's what I had. If I end up going to this date here, October 14th in 432, we can put the biblical dates there. You'll see that's the first day of the 7th month. Okay, in 432. So that's Nehemiah 13. And so we're saying from Nehemiah 13 to the end of the 7 weeks is 8,780 days. Okay, so that's what I wanted to illustrate. Now, is there any significance in 8,780? Now, remember, we're going from the 10th day of the 7th month here to the first day of the 7th month, so it's not equal number of months on like lunar months. And then we have, so the question is, how are we going to analyze this 408, right? Because we talked about 408. So 408 shows up as a date where nothing occurs, but it's part of a structure. So let's think about this. Now, we have dates where nothing occurs that are parts of structures. What happens on July 27th, 1449, for instance? So from 1299 to 1449, July 27th, Do we have anything that happens on that date in 1449? So why did he start counting? Why did Josiah Litch um, count the 391 years from July 27th, 1449, if he did not have an event on that date? So I know we're going to Josiah Litch's prophecy here, but would be the reasoning that Josiah Litch used in understanding Revelation chapter 9? We need to understand this structure. We need to understand this 7 weeks and 408. It has ways in which it's divided, right? The primary division is the 13 and the 36.
Do you add the 15 days on the 391?
Not to get to July 27th. You have to add the 15 days to get to August 11th, right? But he's counting 391 years from July 27th to July 27th. The question is, why does he count from July 27th, 1449, when he doesn't have an event on that date? Even if he used like the biblical date, right, the 26th day of the fourth month, that would be July 27th Gregorian and July 18th Julian. But again, there's no events on that date. So we're trying to understand why we can have, so we got, Angela says 7/27/1449. Okay, so nobody's crowned on that day. The crowning is not going to be on July 27th. So Constantine the 11th is not crowned. He's going to be crowned in February. So nothing happens on July 27th.
Yeah, I looked it up again. I have January 6th. Constantine 11th was crowned.
January 6th?
Yeah.
Okay, that could be right. There's sort of a bunch of things happening in there. Because I remember going through the chronology of that. So I know there's something that happens in January, something that happens in February. But so he's he goes to the Turkish Sultan to get permission to be the Emperor of Rome, right? So it's in that year, but it's not on the day, July 27th.
Right.
Okay, so that tells us something. Now, of course, Josiah Litch understood that. He was simply taking the starting date of the 150 years, the 5 months, adding it to the 391 years. That is the hour, the day, the month, and the year, and then adding the hour at the end to get the 15 days, right? That's how he was doing his calculation. Which I always found interesting is that he adds the 15 days at the end, not at the beginning, right? So he's going to count 391 years and 15 days. But if you look at the verse, it says an hour, a day, a month, and a year. So the hour is the 15 days. The month is 30 years, or the day is 1 year, and the month is 30 years, and the year is 360 years, right? That's how we would do it. So you get the 391 years and 15 days. And if we do it backwards, we don't end up with significant dates. But if we start with the year first, we get to the 26th day of the fourth month in 1809, right? So that's going to bring us the first 360, so the first marker. And it's going to be the Treaty of Dardanelles in 1809 that's going to be signed on July 27th. Right, all those different things. Okay, so the point is we're looking at this idea that we can have a date that doesn't have an event, but yet it's part of a structure. And so to me, that's the first place that we had a date that was part of a structure, but not an event, even though it is tied to an event in that it's in that year, but it's not specific to that day, right? So So this period of adding the 5 months to the other, hour, day, month, and a year, some people think that sort of doesn't make any sense, that he should have counted from the actual event in 1449, and then count the 391 years and 15 days. But of course, we know that's not correct. but some people think that that's what he should have done. Now, so with 408, again, we're going to have Darius II, who is the king of Persia at that time, and he's going to continue reigning until 404. Now, so we took 404 as a symbol and said, well, there's the thing you're looking for can't be found, right? When you're dealing with that on the internet as a symbol. And so we're just saying that during Darius's reign, that last 4 years is tied to that 404 symbol. Okay, so we got 408, then we have 404. So nothing happens in there. Now, there's suggestions that people have. What was the one that you mentioned, Stephen, yesterday? I always forget what. Some people will have different people dying at that time.
I mentioned Malachi.
Malachi, the book of Malachi being written, which there's no evidence for. So it's just basically a guess. Maybe the book of Malachi is written in 408 or something like that. But yeah, no evidence for that. I've had people say, Nehemiah dies then, all different kinds of things that people try to have. Of course, the most common is people just believe the temple's built in 408. It's completed or something. No evidence for that because it was completed in 515. So it doesn't really make sense. Now, we could say maybe there's some other aspect of the temple that's completed in 408, but we don't have anything about it, right? There's no evidence that there's something happening in 408. So we have this structure, we have this 7 weeks, and for some reason it's bothering me. Maybe it doesn't bother everyone. But when I think about this division, we can say, well, it's a Jubilee cycle, and it's illustrating the Jubilee and the sabbatical cycles, the sabbatical cycle at the end with the 1 week, the Jubilee cycle here at the beginning with the 49 years. And that's definitely valid. So we can say, yeah, we have here a Jubilee cycle. But then we can also say, well, there's validity in the division of the 13 and the 36, because we know 13 times 36 is 468. And if we, go from 70 AD, we could add on here, we could have 468 years. I'm just going to do that. So if we put this here, we can now have 538, and I'll just extend this line. That's going to be 468, 13, 36. So that deals with the beginning of this structure, right? That 13 and the 36. Now, would we do something else with these other divisions of this time? So that is, we can say we have 12 times 13, right, for that 25, and then we have 24 left over. You can multiply it that way, you get 3,744. There's different things that we could do with those periods of time. We could just say we have 24 times 25, right, which is 600. So maybe that has some symbol attached to it. Or you could take all of the different divisions, right? You can take 49 times 13 times 12 times 36. You could keep doing that. You could keep multiplying these and getting all these different other types of numbers. Maybe there's something there. So let me see here. What am I doing here? 24 times, just doing some math here. That's 600. Okay. So anyway, we can do that with the 13 times 16. Whether we do that with these other ones, I don't know. So I added here, 408, 432 plus 444 plus 457 you get 1741. Maybe that's something that we would do, similar to what Stephen was doing, but I don't know what 1741 is, if there's some significance to that, because we've been connecting it with our history. But anyway, we can look at this period as some way symbolizing something. We get the 408. We know that ties us to our present time. So we can tie Nehemiah to our history. But is there something else that we're missing? So we got 13, 12, and then 24. Nobody has any ideas what we would do with this. It seems to me that there's something that we're missing, but I don't know what it is. Because if I knew, then it wouldn't be missing. So just looking at some of the other things, let's analyze this a little bit. So I had looked at, 490 solar years are 178,969 days, 490 lunar solar years, that is biblical years, just 178,956. So there's going to be 13 days difference in those two totals. Now 505 lunar years, that is the Islamic years, are 178,956 days. So you can see that we have this 490 lunar solar years are exactly 505 lunar years, right? That is, it's making up for the fact that there is these leap months that aren't added to the lunar years, but they are added to the lunar solar years. Now, the difference there is 15 years difference between the lunar solar and the lunar, but they're the same number of days, right? So that's kind of interesting. That we have that number of years fits nicely into that structure. So that means there's 15 years worth of leap months, that is lunar solar year leap months. 15 times 12 is 180 extra months. So that is if you had, 180 extra months, which is 15 years, right? And then 490 prophetic years, that's the ones where we have 176,400 days. So we can count then that number of prophetic years and come up with this specific span of time. Okay. You got these 13 days here, and then you got these 36 years. I wonder if that somehow relates to the 13 and the 36 at the beginning. Anyway, that's my analysis so far. Whether there's something that we can see that's relevant at this point, I don't know. But I want you guys to think about this, 408. So we're going to parallel this history with our history. So the one thing I suggested is that this 10th day of the 7th month in 408 could somehow connect with the 10th day of the 7th month in 2030. That is, we have the first day of the first month in 2030, right? That is connected to 9/11. But if we count 354 months from September 11th, and we use 30-day months, we come to the 10th day of the 7th month in 2030, which is October 28th, 2030. Okay. And so that would be from the 10th day of the 7th month in 408 BC on using the biblical calendar to the 10th day of the 7th month, which is October 8th in 2030, would be 2,437 years. Okay, so whether that's significant or not.
Well, 2,437, you said? That's like the week of Christ scrambled.
2,437?
Yeah, it's
So
like 27 and 34.
Okay. Okay, so that I think is relevant. So it just shows us that there's some, because it's from the week of Christ study that we get that whole structure of 2030 anyway, right, in the first place. So there's an echo there. I guess the main thing that I'm trying to say, or the main thing that I'm trying to see, is that, you know, we have a symbolic date, which we're not predicting anything. We know that that symbolic date is an extension of time. That is, we don't know when Christ is going to come back. We don't know when probation is going to close. We don't know when the Sunday law is going to occur. We don't know when Nashville is going to be fulfilled, right? We don't know any of those things. But we do know that the time that we're living in presently, even though it's the time of the Sunday law since 9/11, right? We are not expecting immediately a Sunday law because there are events that have to unfold. And so we would wait for those events to unfold before we, make any sort of statements about a Sunday law. That is, we would have to see that we're getting closer to that. Obviously, we're not trying to delay the time. We're just saying we need to understand the time that we're in, what it is that we're supposed to be doing, what it is we're supposed to be accomplishing. Because, if we're putting the cart before the horse, and we're warning people about a Sunday law that's not coming right away, and we're saying it's coming right away, Trump's going to bring the Sunday law, those types of things, and obviously weaken the message in the long run. So we know that we're supposed to be studying. We know that we've had all of this different light regarding, that Stephen brought regarding the chronology that relates to 2026. And so, and we know Trump is a reformer, but how does that fit in with the message that we are to give, I guess, is the question that I'm asking or thinking about. Because we have to have some kind of a message. Now, to me, the message has always been going back to the past and looking at things like 457, looking at what happens under Artaxerxes' decree, understanding what happens under Nehemiah's decree. And then we can say, well, we can take this history and parallel it with our own. And if we're going to look at Nehemiah's final reforms, whose reforms are those? Because we know that there are counterfeit reform lines. We have the first day of the seventh month in 536. We have the first day of the seventh month in 444. We have the first day of the seventh month in 432. And we see that those are counterfeited with the July 1st dates with the SSPX. So the Society of St. Pius X, which recently has been excommunicated, right? However it works, I don't quite fully understand the whole thing. But, because some of the Catholics would say, well, they're excommunicated, so they can't actually be saved, right? That is, if you're excommunicated, you are, it seems to me, you're cut off from Christ, right? That's what they sort of did. I don't fully understand how the Catholic law works. Even the one Catholic said he didn't understand how that would work. So anyway, we have this counterfeit reform line with going back to the Latin Mass. We have a reform line in the United States. We have a reform line within Adventism that this movement is a part of. So going back to the foundation of Adventism. And so we can take this whole history of the 7 weeks and we can place it in our history. So that is, we would say, are we going to take 457 and line that up with 1844? And then if we did that, do we have 444 being November 9th, 1989? And then do we have 432 being November 9th, 2019, or do we have it being 9/11? You understand? Or do we take some of the dates within that and create reform line with these various dates? Like, are we gonna, where do we zoom in? Where do we zoom out? Where is the fractal, right? So you understand what I'm struggling with here. This is that's why I'm analyzing this. I'm trying to understand if there's something that ties us other than, we have these sort of general things. Like if we go back and just some of the things we talked about a bit, like Balaam is going to be mentioned here. We know he represents 11:9, and bread and the water representing, of course, the number of days from November 9th, 89 to 9/11. And so this reform where they're going to read the book of the law on the first day of the 7th month, and they're going to recognize, hey, the Ammonite and the Moabite should not come into the congregation of God forever. And the reason why is this message that relates to the symbols of our message. And then they're going to separate this mixed multitude. And they're going to kick Tobiah out of this chamber in which they used to store the meat offerings, frankincense vessels, and the tithes of the corn and the new wine and the oil that was commanded to be given to the Levites. And so we need to understand what does that symbolize particularly, or specifically. So we can say, well, this could relate something to do with the storehouse and tithes, but it also can have like a more symbolic reference. What does this mean that who is Tobiah particularly? What is he doing in that chamber? We know there's a relationship, so we could look at Adventism, say, Eliashib represents the Adventist church, Tobiah represents the evangelicals. We could do that type of application that seems to me to be valid, but is there some other way in which we would understand this? Now, the other thing that we have here is, remember 432, according to verse 6, this is the 32nd year of Artaxerxes' reign. So we know we have, so we got, and I did this before, but we multiplied like the 7th year of Artaxerxes times the 20th year of Artaxerxes times the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, and we got 4480, right? So what was 4,480? Does that have any significance? We've spent a little bit of time looking at that. So it's something to think about. Yeah, I have to think about that a bit more. Okay, so anyway, we got this 32nd year of Artaxerxes. Now, I'm just trying to figure out, does that represent anything? Right? Like, the thing about the 32nd is, it's not the 31st. If it's like the 31st year of Artaxerxes, we'd have the midst of the week or something like that. Is there anything about 32 that we have to consider of what it might represent? Can't think of 32 being a symbol anywhere, particularly. I mean, the only thing I can think is, we've got 32 years from 1989 to 2021, where our line, the 777 ends. So you can kind of say that there's, if you take 30 years and you add 777 days, 731 or 730 is 2 years. And so you could say, well, it's 32 years. So maybe that's what it's pointing to the end of our line there. So that would tie in with it's part of our structure. But it doesn't bring us to 2026 or anything. But as far as the reform here, so Eliashib, if it represents the Adventist church and Tobiah is in this chamber, it's going to be Nehemiah who's going to kick him out. So Nehemiah would be this reformer, which would represent our reform movement. What particularly would this symbolize, other than just the apostasy, the connection with evangelicals, right? So when Nehemiah says, "It grieved me sore, therefore I cast forth all of the household stuff of Tobiah out of the chamber." So it's household stuff, right? I don't know if there's some symbol in that. Okay. And then I commanded, and they cleansed the chambers, and thither brought I again the vessels of the house of God with the meat offering and the frankincense. So obviously this could symbolize something, particularly what? Now, and it says, "I perceived that the portions of the Levites had not been given them, for the Levites and the singers that did the work were fled every one to his field." Right? So that is, they needed to work to support themselves. Right? So they're not really doing their job now because they're having to work to support themselves instead of being supported by these offerings. And then I contended with the rulers and said, "Why is the house of God forsaken?" And I gathered them together and set them in their place. And then brought all Judah the tithe of the corn and the new wine and the oil unto the treasuries. Right? So you're going to have corn, new wine, which is grape juice, and oil. And now this also, this puts it in this period when you're dealing with new wine. This is in the harvest in the fall, right? So this is one thing that obviously we know it's in the fall, but it's just another thing that shows that. And I made treasurers over the treasuries, right? So he's going to set up these things that he had set up before, but just establish those. And in those days I saw I in Judah some treading wine presses on the Sabbath, bringing in sheaves and lading asses, as also wine grapes and figs and all manner of burdens, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I testified against them in the day wherein they sold the victuals. So what would this be representing? And normally we'd think of treading the wine presses as a symbol is a good thing, because that would be studying God's word. But here this is about money, right? This is about selling on the Sabbath.
Could it also be preaching from the hellish torch of Satan on Sabbath?
It could be. It could be, yes, just the false doctrine, right?
Right.
Now, when it comes to lading asses, we would have asses normally represent
Islam,
right? So maybe there's some symbol in there, right? So there's just lots of things that we have to decide about. Now, we also got there dwelt men of Tyre also therein. Now Tyre, of course, they're connected with the coast, and they're going to have the fish.
and with the papacy singing as a harlot.
Yeah. So this would be, related to the papacy, all manner of ware, and sold on the Sabbath unto the children of Judah and in Jerusalem. So you got the Protestants dealing with Tobiah and that, and now you have the papacy here as well, right? So you got and God's people also are doing this. Then I contended with the nobles of Judah and said unto them, "What evil thing is this that ye do, and profane the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers thus, and did not our God bring all this evil upon us and upon this city? That ye bring more wrath upon Israel by profaning the Sabbath." So this is the story in Nehemiah that often people look at Nehemiah's reforms. Like we take Nehemiah and we just think about 444 building the streets and walls, and there is some mention about keeping the Sabbath there. But here is really where the Sabbath reform occurs. And so the Sabbath reform, how is it symbolizing? I mean, we could say people are profaning the Sabbath, but only a holy person can keep the Sabbath holy, right? There is this within Adventism, this form of godliness, but denying the power of God. Just simple as that, right? Pretending to be God's people, and yet really not following what God has laid out. Now, we have this symbol here dealing with sunset, So it came to pass when the gates of Jerusalem began to be dark before the Sabbath. So you're going to have these gates that they should be shut. So we have a shut door there, which would symbolize the close of probation, right? So this is probably the close of probation within Adventism. We got the gates there. We looked at that word because there are different words for gates. But this here, 8176, wait for it. Right, that's to split open, reason, calculate, reckon, estimate. And it's for he that thinketh in his heart, so is he. Eat and drink, saith he, but his heart is not with thee. So there it's this word think, thinketh, or to calculate, reckon, estimate, reason out, split open. So that's what the word gate means, and that's Proverbs 23 verse 7, that word is used in that sense. So at the gates, so there's some kind of calculation being done. So the merchants and sellers of all kind of ware lodged without Jerusalem once or twice, which I thought was interesting. Then I testified against them and said unto them, why lodge ye about the wall? If ye do so again, I will lay hands on you. And from that time forth came they no more on the Sabbath. And I commanded the Levites that they should cleanse themselves and that they should come to keep the gates, to sanctify the Sabbath day. So we have the Levites who need to keep the gates. The word keep means to hedge about, to guard, protect, attend, to be circumspect. And it is the same word for gates, of course. And they need to sanctify the Sabbath day. And in those days also saw I Jews that had married wives of Ashdod, of Ammon and Moab. So we got, Ammon and Moab, of course, we already have dealt with, but Ashdod means I will spoil, from the word ravager. Okay. So I don't know what particularly this would refer to, Jews marrying the wives of Ashdod, but we can understand Ammon and Moab. So it's probably just something there that we could understand maybe. I don't know. Now, the interesting part here is their children spake half in the speech of Ashdod. You could not speak in the Jews' language, but according to the language of each people. Now, so not sure what they mean if they spoke half, whether that's literal, just as half or in the middle. So that means obviously they spoke some words that were Jewish, but they couldn't really articulate in the Jewish language. So they had a mixed speech. And I contended with them and cursed them and smote certain of them and plucked off their hair and made them swear by God, saying, Ye shall not give your daughters unto their sons, nor take their daughters unto your sons, or for yourselves. And then referring back to Solomon's sin in regard to this matter. Okay. And shall we then hearken unto you to do all this great evil? To transgress against our God in marrying strange wives. So that strange, again, we noted before, outlandish and strange, outlandish women, strange, same word for it. And one of the sons of Joiada, the son of Elishib, the high priest, was son-in-law to Sanballat, the Horonite. Therefore I chased him from me. So he had married the daughter of Sanballat. Yeah, so Anja notes Ashdod, Philistines, ravagers, and disarmers of God's people. Associations with some of the worst enemies of SDA. Seventh-day Adventism. Okay. Could be. Now, so Sanballat, a Moabite of Hororaim, and the opponent of Nehemiah, and the returned exiles in their goal of rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. So that's Sanballat. Yeah, so that word name's only in Nehemiah. It was in Nehemiah 2. And Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the servant of the Ammonite heard of it and grieved them exceedingly, right? That is when Nehemiah comes back and they start building the wall, right? So he's going to be one of these opponents. So why they would intermarry with this person, we don't know. So just every place he's mentioned. So Sanballat and Tobiah are enemies, and yet they're intermarried, right? So now I do think that one of the problems that we have had in regard to the movement is, and this is typical in Adventism, is we adopt stuff from other places, and we try to make it into Adventist thinking. We try to fit it in with our thinking. You know, and I can think back to some of the conspiracy theories dealing with the Zionist conspiracy theories and conspiracy theories regarding like there is obviously a conspiracy with, you know, the Jesuits and so forth, and we know that the Catholic Church has a role. But if you look at the non-Adventist version of these conspiracy theories, which started before Adventism ever existed, dealing with like the Illuminati and so forth, you can see that Adventists take some of these things and modify them to fit with the Jesuits and different things like that. Now, originally this was all a Jewish conspiracy, right? So this is, it was the Jews who were doing this. So, and that would be, to me, one of the things that I see troubling within Adventism in general, in our movement as well, is the mixing of just false ideas. And these can be, you know, areas of like New Age medicine, conspiracy theories, different views on prophecy. You know, we see Adventists talking about, you know, the blood moons and things like this, or whatever, you know, just all kinds of different errors that have come into Adventism and into this movement that has really destroyed it, right? Satan's attack upon this movement really has left not much left of the movement, really, of its original intent and purpose. Okay, so he says, remember them, O my God, because they have defiled the priesthood and the covenant of the priesthood and of the Levites. So in this sense, remembering them is not a good thing. Thus cleansed I them from all strangers. And again, you're just going to have this word, you know, alien, strange, right? And appointed the wards of the priests and the Levites, everyone in his business, and for the wood offering at times appointed, and for the first fruits, remember me, O my God, for good. So these people that are cleansed from all the strangers, these are dealing with who is cleansed from all the strangers. What thus cleansed I them from all strangers, and appointed the wards of the priest and the Levites, everyone in his business, and for the wood offering at times appointed, and for the first fruits, remember me, O my God, for good. He finishes off with. So there's some kind of situation. These people who had married strange wives, they're going to be separated from those strange wives, and there's some kind of labor that's appointed to them, dealing with the hauling of wood and things like that. I'm not particularly certain what that's referring to.
That could go back to Joshua 9, right?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what's happening here. That so people are put into labor, and thus they're cleansed, right? But they still are having some kind of responsibility. So I'm not sure what group this is particularly. Okay, so So here's what Keel and Dillich say. Nehemiah concludes his work with a short summary of what he had effected for the community. I cleansed them from all strangers. So it says compare with Nehemiah 13:23, where these people are married to, Ashdod, Moab, and Ammon. And 9 verse 2, the seed of all Israel separated themselves from all strangers. Right, so it's just referring to this. And appointed the services for the priests and the Levites, each in his business, and for the wood offerings at time appointed, and for the first fruits. The suffix here refers to the Jews, and then we have the word netar, which means strange or foreign, heathen customs, and chiefly marriages with heathen women. So when he appoints these people, right, properly to set a watch, here used in the more general sense of to appoint posts of service for the priests and Levites, that is to arrange the attendance upon those offices which they had to perform at their posts in the temple according to the law. So I appointed the attendants for the delivery of the wood for the altar at appointed times, and for the first fruits, for bringing into the sanctuary the heave offering for the priests. And Bakharim, the Bakharim are named as Pars Pro Toto instead of, not sure with those vowel pointings, the Ruma Perumut prescribed by the law. The arrangements connected with those two subjects, the purification from heathen practices and the restoration of the regular performance of divine worship, was Nehemiah's whole energy concentrated. After the fortification of Jerusalem by a wall of circumvallation had been completed, he thus earned a lasting claim to the gratitude of the congregation of his fellow countrymen that returned from Babylon, and can conclude his narrative with the prayer that God would remember him for good. On this frequently repeated supplication, Rabbi Josiah remarks, this piety is, however, as we can fail also to perceive. Okay, I don't know. Okay, so anyway, we can see that there's these reforms in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes. And so I can look at here. So any more thoughts about any of this, what we can do? I think next week we're going to have to just kind of draw the lines out a little more precisely, put all these stands in there. Now, we still had to deal with, because I've looked at the dates there in dealing with the Constitution and, July 4th, 1776. Now, William told me that on July 4th in 1776, the Declaration was signed by two people. Dwight, do you know about that? Because you said it was signed on August 2nd, but there was two people that signed it on July 4th. Just getting back to the Constitution and July 4th, 1776. Not the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, pardon me. So we got the Declaration of Independence signed on July 4th by two people, and then it's going to be on August 2nd that it's going to be completed. So that's something we have to look into a little further. And so we got this past July 4th, we got Trump in this time of reform. We know that we can connect.
It was John Hancock and Charles Thomas.
Yeah, Charles Thomas and John Hancock signed it on July 4th, but the rest of the people signed it by August 2nd, or were there different people signing at different times? The Declaration of Independence.
Right, I think it was on August 2nd, the rest of them.
Okay. So they all just got together on August 2nd and the rest of them signed it. What you're saying? So there wasn't like different people signing it on different days?
I think that's I think it was one other guy that signed it, but it was later on. He was the last one to sign it, I think.
Okay, let me see. So according to Wikipedia, signing of the United States Declaration of Independence occurred primarily on August 2nd, 1776, at the Pennsylvania State House, later renamed Independence Hall in Philadelphia. The 56 delegates of the Second Continental Congress represented the 13 colonies, of which 12 voted to approve the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776. That is, the 12 colonies. The New York delegation abstained because they had not yet received authorization from Albany to vote on the issue of independence. The Declaration proclaimed the 13 colonies were now free and independent states, no longer colonies of the Kingdom of Great Britain, and thus no longer part of the British Empire. The signers' names are grouped by state, with the exception of John Hancock as president of the Continental Congress. The states are arranged geographically from north to south, with Button Gwinnett from the Georgia list and Matthew Thornton from the New Hampshire list. So it says they voted on July 4th, with 12 of the 13 colonies voting in favor, so they're repeating some of this. That Thomas McKean disputed that the declaration in 1796, signer Thomas McKean, here I'll go back and read further. Okay, I'm going to read this here, the date of signing. I can bring this up. You can see what I'm reading. It might be easier. Okay. So the Second Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence on July 4, 1776, with 12 of the 13 colonies voting in favor and New York abstaining. The date that the Declaration was signed has long been the subject of debate. Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and John Adams all wrote that it was signed by Congress on the day it was adopted on July 4, 1776. Additional support for the July 4th date is provided by the official public record in the Journals of the Continental Congress, published in 1777, where the entry for July 4th states that the Declaration was engrossed and signed on that date, the official copy handwritten by Timothy Matlack. In 1796, signer Thomas McKean disputed that the Declaration had been signed on July 4th, pointing out that some signers were not present, including several who were not even elected to Congress until after that date. No person signed it on that day, nor for many days after. His claim gained support when the secret journals of Congress were published in 1821. The secret journals contained 2 previously unpublished entries about the Declaration. New York's delegates were granted permission from their convention to agree to the Declaration on July 9th. News that reached the Continental Congress on July 15th, and Secret Journal's entry for July 19th reads, resolved that the Declaration passed on the 4th to be fairly engrossed on parchment with the title and style of the unanimous Declaration of the 13 United States of America, and that the same, when engrossed, be signed by every member of Congress. The entry for August 2nd states, the Declaration of Independence being engrossed and compared at the table was signed by the members. In 1884, historian Malene Chamberlain argued that these entries indicated that the famous signed version of the Declaration had been created following the July 19th resolution and had not been signed by Congress until August 2nd. Subsequent research has confirmed that many of the signers had not been present in Congress on July 4th, and that some delegates may have added their signatures even after August 2nd. Neither Jefferson nor Adams ever wavered from their belief that the signing ceremony took place on July 4th, yet most historians have accepted the argument which David McCulloch articulates in his biography of John Adams. No such scene with all the delegates present ever occurred at Philadelphia. Legal historian Wilfred Ritz concluded in 1986 that about 34 delegates signed the Declaration on July 4th, and that the others signed on or after August 2nd. Ritz argues that the engrossed copy of the Declaration was signed by Congress on July 4th, as Jefferson, Adams, and Franklin had stated, and that it was implausible that all 3 men had been mistaken. He believes that McKean's testimony was questionable and that historians had misinterpreted the July 19th resolution. According to Ritz, this resolution did not call for a new document to be created, but rather for the existing one to be given a new title, which was necessary after New York had joined the other 12 states in declaring independence. He reasons that the phrase signed by every member of Congress in the July 19 resolution meant that delegates who had not signed the declaration on the 4th were now required to do so. In the 1811 letter to Adams, Benjamin Rush recounted the signing in stark fashion, describing it as a scene of pensive and awful silence. Rush says the delegates were called up one after another and then filed forward somberly to subscribe what each thought was their ensuing death warrant. He related that the gloom of the morning was briefly interrupted when the rotund Benjamin Harrison of Virginia said to a diminutive Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts at the signing table, "I shall have a great advantage over you, Mr. Gerry, when we are all hung for what we are now doing. From the size and weight of my body, I shall die in a few minutes and be with the angels. But from the lightness of your body, you will dance in the air an hour or two before you are dead." According to Rush, Harrison's remark procured a transient smile, but it was soon succeeded by the solemnity with which the whole business was conducted. Okay, so we can see there's some dispute there, but it seems the idea that there's definitely some signing going on July 4th. So it's going to go in here about details about the different signers. John Hancock is the famous, iconic one. Okay, so that should be. Anyway, that's the issue dealing with the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Anybody want to add anything to that?
Not at this time.
Okay. So the main thing that we see here is we have this July 4th and July 1st and the first day of the 7th month. They have some connection. That is, we're connecting the story of Nehemiah with the story of our present history, right, and the story of American history. So there's some connection there that we still know there's lots of details we have to understand more fully on how to connect it. But whether the Declaration is signed on July 4th, 1776, it's definitely the date that the Americans have for the anniversary of independence. Now, again, we have the Declaration of Independence, and then later we have the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Now, I'm sure all the Americans all know what all of the different amendments are, and you know the Constitution thoroughly. But as a Canadian, I don't, right? And then trying to understand that so we have these different amendments that are part of, how did you put that, Dwight? So when we have these amendments, these are things that, it's the way that I would think of an amendment is you have this Constitution, and then people come along later and decide to add things to it. But these things are there as part of it from the beginning, but just not officially.
They were not they did not become part directly of the Constitution because there were battles with how these things are to be worded by different delegates to the Constitutional Convention.
Okay, so how do they hold these things sort of before they get approved or whatever it is? Like, I don't quite understand that. So you have these amendments, but they originally proposed.
Correct.
but they're not all voted in right at the beginning.
They're not all accepted. That's correct.
And it's because all of the states have to accept them. Or is that what happens?
It's that you have at that point you had to have the majority of the states accepting.
Okay.
Because if the states did not ratify the amendment, then they were not going to become part of the Constitution.
Okay. And so, but there are there amendments that are on the Constitution that weren't originally proposed?
Yes.
Okay, so what would those be?
Well, okay. Your first, the of the 17 that were initially proposed, you had 12 of those that it came through the House and then came through the Senate and then Congress that approved them. And 10 of those became the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution.
Okay. Now, yeah, so I don't quite understand this. So you have Bill of Rights, but
Yes,
these were originally proposed as part of the Constitution, but not called the Bill of Rights?
that is correct.
Okay. So why did they end up calling them the Bill of Rights? Like, what's the distinction there if it's just part of the Constitution?
It's denoting them as a separate grouping. Now, if we use this in a comparison,
Okay.
you have 10 amendments to the Constitution that make up the Bill of Rights.
Yeah, the first 10.
But yet those first 10 are seen very directly as being part of the Constitution itself. When the children of Israel came to Sinai,
Yeah.
our Heavenly Father, through Christ, gave a revelation of his character that are 10 promises.
Yeah.
But after the 10 promises were given, an expansion on those 10 promises became the law of Moses.
So some of it is an expansion, some of it's
Correct.
not really an expansion, some of it's just extra stuff, but
Okay. Now,
but yeah, okay. So you're just saying that there is but originally they proposed 17
correct.
amendments, but they weren't, like, I just don't understand why they're not part of the Constitution. So
Well, of those 17, I apologize. Of those 17, some of them made up other portions of the Bill of Rights and some of them didn't.
Yeah.
The second of the 17 did not become ratified until 1992.
Yeah.
Now, there were portions of this that became or that came later as amendments to the Constitution. One of those amendments to the Constitution dealt with prohibition in the 1920s.
So these are called articles then. Like they have these first article, second article. So the second article was ratified May 5th, 1992 as the 27th Amendment.
Correct.
Okay. So
I'll try to put something together for us to look at this more deeply.
Okay. Okay. So thanks for that. Yeah. So it's just, we need to understand these things. There's probably details that will jump out at us at some point. Any final thoughts before we close with prayer? Okay, let's pray. Dear Father in heaven, we thank you for the time that we've had here this morning and in this week of morning studies. We just pray for the study tomorrow, the studies on Sabbath, and of course next week. We just ask that we can continue to spend time with you in prayer and study, and that you can help us in the things that we do each day to represent you. So bless each person. May your angels watch over them, we pray. In Jesus' name.